If you're a business owner, you're trying to figure out what's changing in the landscape of AI overviews and AI search, I'm here to help you out. My name is Samir Singhani. I'm going to walk through a current state of the market on exactly what's changing in the space. So let's jump right into it. With the last couple of years, as chatbots become more prevalent, as Google search is starting to move towards AI overviews, as people are adopting social media platforms like Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Threads, Reddit, Amazon, it's becoming even more clear that the path of the buyer journey has completely shifted from just the typical Google search to now a multi-platform dimension where if you're selling a product or a service as a small business owner, you need to think about a lot more than just Google search. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through exactly what's changing in the landscape. I'm going to help explain some of the analytics, what we're seeing in some of the numbers based on actual market research, and then what you can do about it so that way you can be ahead of the changing trends and also set your business up for success. So I think it's not uncommon to think that the old playbook has really dramatically changed in this space. So previously you would need to be able to publish content on your website or a blog, you would be able to rank. And so that way when someone were to search for your service or offering, you would come up within those blue links on Google search. Safe to say that that's completely changing because now we've got different things like AI overviews, which are showing right up top. And people are starting to realize that you may not actually even get the click. So what Google has basically done is taken everyone's content and then give the answer right to the buyer right up top. So that way they don't need to go and search through every website. Obviously, that's not a good thing because that means you're not actually getting the click or even getting cited for your work. The other playbook was you would track referral links. So if you would have a link directly within your URL, if someone were to cite your article or blog content, for example, you would get a referral link. Obviously, that's changing now as well because of data privacy and cookies, for example. Not every single browser or even tracking mechanism still allows you to fully verify the source of the information. And also, you would normally optimize for traffic, which means you would post content, you would be able to kind of get visits to your website, and you'd optimize around keywords and things like that. That's all changing because the way that buyers are searching nowadays is they're asking questions and getting answers. They're no longer just typing a handful of keywords like personal training, for example. They're asking questions in longer form, and they're obviously highly intentful buyers, but they're doing research before that. So it's safe to say that the old playbook itself is kind of, or if it hasn't already gone away, we're starting to now understand that people are creating content on multiple platforms. They're creating content on YouTube, long form videos, just like this one, Instagram content as well. So they're teaching people directly within their reels, within carousels. There are Twitter or X now has long threads of information. So people are educating their buyers directly within Twitter and then linking to some sort of like Substack or medium.com post, for example, right from Twitter. And then there's things obviously like TikTok, which are basically like Instagram Reels, where they're teaching short form content as well. So, you know, based on the multi-platform dimension, people are getting their information from a number of different sources beyond Google. And you as a business owner, you're trying to figure out, well, where do I post? What do I do? And so I'm going to be here to help clarify some of those things on how these rules are changing. And I think you'll help at least kind of set your mindset on what to expect and how you can start to re-strategize your marketing strategies. It's also easy to see that as you're doing business with customers, you are getting multiple touch points as well. So it's not like someone just searches and then gets an answer and then buys your product or service. Obviously, it's becoming the path to the buyer intent is multidimensional, which means they're asking friends, they are reading something in a blog article, for example, they are doing their research on Amazon, or they may have heard something from a reel or a podcast on YouTube. They are going through multiple different channels to research a particular topic. If you're searching for a car, for example, you're going to most likely ask your friends, you're going to look on YouTube, you're probably going to see some reels on Instagram. So it's safe to say that the buyer journey is completely expanded across multiple platforms, and you're getting your information from different sources. So it's not all just coming from one source anymore. And obviously that itself has, different levels of trust because buyers are seeing brands across multiple platforms. And that's how they really develop confidence in a brand because they're going to see, let's say it's Tesla, for example. Tesla is on every single major platform. That obviously develops a relationship with the customer. It helps drive brand trust and reputation as well because the buyer can see, all their different pieces of content across multiple platforms. And then obviously, as people are creating content around the product or service, you're seeing that also expand. These are just some metrics to show you exactly the number of searches. So, you may be thinking that search volume may have gone down. Actually, just the reverse. So this is a stat from Spark Toro back in June of 2026. So just about a month ago or 2 months ago, we're actually seeing volumes of searches go up. So roughly 60% of searches, let's say that was a baseline back in 2024, we're seeing those numbers hit 68%. So volume is obviously up in terms of people searching for information on the internet. Overall activity is growing. We're seeing more people on the internet. Obviously, in parts around the world, more places are getting access to the internet and mobile devices, et cetera. So that's making it obviously very easy for for the volumes to grow. But safe to say that most of these searches are ending right before they visit a website, which means that as they're searching platforms like Google, for example, they're probably getting their answer very quickly, or from like a ChatGPT chatbot, they're getting their answer right then and there, right directly within the LLM, the AI platform, whether they're looking at Claude or ChatGPT or Google AI overviews, they're not going through all the way to your website. And that presents a concern for business owners because they're realizing that, well, if you're creating all this content on your website, well, is there still a need for a website? And how do I adapt my business around this type of customer behavior? But safe to say, your website still has a purpose. It's just going to evolve a little bit. And I'll get into more of that in just a moment. So it's not surprising to see that as AI overviews themselves start to become more prevalent in the market, back in 20, there was a panel done by W Research Center, and what they basically found is that AI summaries are basically cutting that click. So just like the previous slide, people are getting their answer directly from the LLM right up top on Google, and they're no longer going through to even the first page, believe it or not, let alone the second page, which basically means that you are either going to be cited directly within that answer if your content's really unique, and if you're not, then chances are you're probably not going to be seen by the customer. So this graph just shows that when people clicked after a Google search in 2025, they're getting their information right from the summary, which means half of all visits are just stopping right there, which is a huge amount of volume if you compare it to the previous generation where people would actually go down into the blue links and actually click through your website. So this further just solidifies that point. It's safe to say that search is not disappearing. It's actually spreading across multiple platforms. Just going back to what I mentioned previously, that previously, while you may think that traditional search is actually going down in volume, it's not. It's actually going up in volume, but people are looking across multiple dimensions. They're looking at Amazon, for example, as commerce. They're looking at different social platforms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Threads, Substack, for example, or Medium, or LinkedIn. Safe to say that they are searching, but they're searching for confidence around their answer across multiple platforms. So it's no longer just one dimension, it's a multi-dimension search. And that buyer obviously has a large amount of intent, but chances are, if you're not available on every single platform, chances are you're probably not going to be one of the buyers or the service providers to meet the need as people are searching in this way. And believe it or not, AI tools like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or even Perplexity, for example, represent only about 3%. The amount of people that actually have a ChatGPT subscription is actually very, very low. I think it's something like maybe less than 3 to 5% of the total world's population. So AI tools have just started to come out within the last couple of years. They just started to get really good. But a lot of people think that AI has completely augmented their search. And while that might be true, it's really just it's really just a summary layer of taking the information, aggregating it. But the AI tools themselves are only serving about 3% of traffic right now, contrary to popular belief. And so this might have you thinking, well, as people are asking questions what exactly is happening. What's happening is that people are asking questions, and Google and some of these LLM tools like ChatGPT or Claude, for example, these bots themselves are going around and searching the internet. They are looking for consistency in information. So if you have a website that says one thing and then your LinkedIn says something else or your Instagram says something else and you're not consistent, well, then what happens is that the AI bot does not have confidence in serving that answer to the customer. So if the bot's not confident, then it's not going to even show your results up at the very top. And so buyers that are actually surviving in this method, if you look at the slide here, the summary view itself is really, really compressed. And what serves that recommendation is the high probability of that answer being actually factually correct, which means if that bot is searching across, let's say, personal training, for example, and you're a business owner in, Marlboro, New Jersey, for example, and your information is consistent across every single portal or platform for that matter, then chances are someone who searches for personal training in Marlboro and sees that same amount of consistency, whether it's a service, who you serve, what age range, for example, and you're consistent and you have a personal call to action that's consistent across all platforms, then that bot has a lot more confidence that answer, depending on the nature of the question, that you are the right person because you are represented across multiple platforms and you're consistent with your messaging. So that's basically what's happening now. And so what that basically means is that only a handful of businesses are actually surviving this environment. And those that do are the ones that are starting to win in the space as AI search is changing. And so like as this is changing, there's obviously a couple of questions that you want to start thinking about as a business owner. When someone lands on a social profile or your YouTube or your website, can they understand what you do in one sentence? Plain simple speak, who you serve, what you offer, where you're based potentially, and what is that next call to action. That really is the driving force here, because if it's not immediately clear above the hero what that next action that user is supposed to take, then chances are the AI bot doesn't know what you do either. And so I've seen many customers really take a step back and look at, well, let me just, if I were to look at this from 1,000 feet view, or like, let's say it's a brand, if I'm a brand new customer, is it clear exactly what I do, who I serve, and how a customer gets in touch? And if it's not clear to the average Joe, then the bot itself is probably not going to know either. And so what businesses are doing is that they're really trying to double down and make sure that their platforms are consistent. The second is, as customers are searching for information, can they verify it with proof or reviews? So this is beyond just Google reviews. That's obviously a big component of it. But what does the public market say about your product or service? Are they leaving reviews on more than just Google? Are they saying good things about you on your Instagram, for example? Are they commenting on your Instagram posts? Are they leaving reviews for you on Yelp or even Yellow Pages, for example? Believe it or not, the review surface is multidimensional, just like searches. So it's not necessarily just one platform, Google reviews, but reviews and what people are saying holistically about your business. Are people linking back to you? Do you have earned media or content that speaks about your brand or business? And does the public record actually agree with all the things that you say on your website? So really reconciling who you serve, what you offer, what people say about you is really becoming the next layer of the information that the bots themselves are trying to understand. And if that is inconsistent, then it just lowers the probability of you coming up in that search result, depending on what that customer is actually questioning. And so I was mentioning earlier before about how, if you typically use a tool like Google Analytics, for example, or you use things like cookie blockers, what's basically happening is that as Google Analytics has evolved in a number of years, it's becoming more prevalent that these browsers themselves and data privacy is becoming a huge component, which means chances are you're not necessarily going to allow cookies everywhere you search. You may not necessarily allow for your location services to be turned on, and rightfully so. You don't want, the internet gods to know what you're doing at all times. You may use incognito mode, for example. So obviously privacy has had a huge impact on people's browser history and search history. And so your Google Analytics business is not necessarily a good representation of the customers and what they're doing with your website. So it's fair to say that as the landscape has evolved, the analytics are not really telling the same story that they used to tell. And so that's obviously a challenging for you to determine how you use those analytics to derive what the next step should be in your business. So things like ad blockers, cookies are obviously impact for that. People are not just using one computer anymore. They're using their mobile device, they're using a desktop, they're using a laptop, they're using an iPad. And so like if you're searching for, let's say a product or a service and you're going between multiple devices, you're not necessarily just sticking to one device in your search. You may think about something today and use your desktop, and then you may go on your phone tomorrow and search that same thing, but through a different device. That level of inconsistency, Google Analytics and some of these tools cannot coherently be able to measure across all devices. And mix it in with the privacy concern. If chances are, if your cookies are on one browser but not the other one, you're not going to be consistently able to track your analytics and what buyers are consistently doing with your products or service that they're visiting your website or where they're coming from. It just the data itself is not accurate. And then on top of that, as customers are DMing you or they might be sending you direct text messages, the social platforms don't have a record of that at all, because obviously like DMs directly to your social profile is really just conversations between you and your customer, or if someone's texting your business directly, that information is not publicly available. And so therefore that content, that information is something that is really valuable to your business. But if someone's saying good things about you and they're promoting you directly from within a DM or a text message, that's not adding to your behavior. That's not adding to any value to what the public domain can infer about your product or service. And so I would just say that like not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a huge shift, but it is obviously evolving here. Fewer journeys are starting with a website visit. It's obvious that people are searching social platforms. The answers themselves are surfacing much more quickly right above the fold directly on Google search, or they're getting answers from Amazon reviews, for example. The discovery of your business is fragmented across multiple platforms. It's not just one place where people are getting their information from anymore. And also, the attribution around how you may have received that click or earned the business is not immediately clear either. What's still true is that Google's still a dominant search engine. So, as many people say that AI search is changing the landscape, it obviously is, but Google still represents a large portion of search volume. And that remains to be seen if Google continues to maintain that contender spot. But I would just say that, like, still looking at your website, looking at your social profiles, making sure your facts are aligned, that is not going to be something that you want to oversee, or you'll want to triple check all that information, because again, the information, the good old SEO playbook is still alive and well. How you structure your website, your sitemap, your LLM's text file. Do you have the information readily available for an agent to be able to pull your information? A lot of websites now that I've seen from some of my customers, they may put like a price on a picture and then put the picture on their website, and the LLM itself is not going to be able to like infer your product or service from pictures on your website, believe it or not. So like understanding how websites are being pulled or read by these chatbots is really key as well. But it's ever more important that your site has the facts readily available, so that way as buyers are shopping their journey, that you are presenting your information in the right way. Proof is still really important. So as people are leaving reviews on your website, they're saying good things about you, that still is really important as a business owner to maintain trust with your customers. And things like calls, inquiries, bookings, and revenues, that obviously all still matters. Having a good flow around understanding where your calls are coming from, how you're getting inquiries, how people are booking your service, attribution around some of those channels like email or direct phone calls, those are really, really key. So those are some of the non-negotiables that if you don't already do today, that's definitely still just as important. No matter how this landscape is changing with AI search, the fundamentals still remain. And so I would just say that as customers are asking you questions, as they are inquiring about your product or service, as they're sending you DMs or sending you emails or texting you, those answers themselves is really, or those questions for that matter, is really chances are what they're probably putting into the AI search engine too. So I think a lot of people don't realize this, but as customers are asking you questions, even personally, that information is really valuable, because chances are you've already seen that behavior. You've seen what customers are asking about your service. They may say, what is the monthly price for a membership, for example? Well, I would take that question, I would put an answer and put it right on your website. and make that very easy for the AI bot to be able to search, the information is valuable. And so as customers are inquiring about your product or service, if they have information that you're constantly repeating yourself, chances are they're asking the bot or the AI chat bot the same information. Take that as an opportunity for you to then structure that information and put it directly on your website, so that way you are speaking native to how people are asking those questions. Continue to prove value. I see a lot of people, they don't necessarily demonstrate expertise on their product or service. So as you're teaching people, as you're getting involved on the platforms, answering questions, take a moment to look at what you're doing on your social platforms. Are you putting together information or content that's valuable to your buyer? That still remains really, really important. And I would just look at your call to action. I see a lot of websites and a lot of my customers have multiple different calls to action. You really just need one. Either they're going to call you, or they're going to, book your service online, or email you, or book a call. That call to actions, again, some of the fundamentals that are really just as important, those are still really important before people even get to your website. So I will focus on those foundations just as much as the old SEO rules still play well today. Also, in terms of like your social media platform and your strategy itself, learn to provide value. There's a book by Gary Vaynerchuk, which I probably read, probably a decade ago now. It's a really good book. It's called Jab, 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 Right Hook. And that book really talks about giving value to a customer. So if you're providing a service or an offer and you're constantly asking people to buy your product, to buy your service, you're not really earning their trust. So what I would recommend is giving value. Teach people something. Give them something of value directly within your content strategy, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, for example. Teach them something of value. So that way, like as you understand your customers' behavior and some of the questions that they've asked you, chances are you already have that content. It's a matter of taking that and putting it into a format that can be read and helpful for other customers who may have that same question. And chances are, if you're a business owner, you kind of know what questions are being asked by your customers, but that itself is content. So learn to give a deposit, and that's kind of how I phrase it here. Give more than you ask from your audience. Give information, and you want to kind of aim for a 5-to-1 ratio is really a good rule of thumb. Give 5 pieces of valuable information to your customer before you ask them to buy your product or service or book an offer, for example. And that general ratio works pretty well because you're giving something, you're earning the trust, you're able to develop your audience, you gain followers. So all of that really just helps create goodwill with your audience before you ask them to buy or book your offer, for example. I would also recommend looking at your audience and who exactly you're serving. So as you're creating pieces of content, understanding who your ICP is, your buyer in that journey, where they are on their journey, what decisions they're trying to make, and what kind of content would be valuable as they're in that journey. So as customers are searching across the different platforms, coming up with the answers that they may be asking based on that type of audience persona, and then looking at the, what kind of information is helpful for them as they're on that journey. And then what outcome are they looking to achieve as well? Are they looking to, book your service? Are they looking to buy a vehicle, sign up for personal training, or hire a photographer, or, get their roof redone? Whatever the outcome is, depending on what business you're in, understand the buyer's intent and their outcome, and then what questions are coming up as they are in that process of looking for a vendor to offer that service. That will kind of help you understand what kind of content to create, and then you back that into what people are putting into the platforms. That helps you come up with content ideas and more likely to rank higher on the AI chatbots. And one of the most controversial things that I hear a lot of people say is that, well, they don't want to build their house on rented land. That the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you don't necessarily have control over how the algorithm changes. And to a certain extent, that's going to be true. But I would say, if anything, this is the perfect opportunity to build your house on rented land, because you're not necessarily going to lose anything, because you'll have the content, you'll have the information, you can store it on Google Drive, you can save the information. Yes, you're posting it on the platform and you're quote unquote building content natively to that platform, but you can save it. And if that platform changes their algorithm rules, for example, which happened to Facebook probably a couple years ago, which why nobody really posts there anymore, you are still creating content that's of value. So I wouldn't let the whole build your house on rented land narrative get too much in the way of you even starting the process, because there's ways that you can save and actually nurture an audience this way. You can put information out in content and then drive them to a newsletter, for example, where you gather an email. You put out a lead magnet, and in order for people to get the lead magnet, they have to enter their email address. And then that becomes an owned audience. So the way I would think about it is your rented reach is going to be things like social, on search. You put out videos like this on YouTube, and then that also leads into some sort of resource or guide or information that comes to your website. That landing funnel can then ask for an email or a phone number, for example, and a name. And then that becomes part of your audience. And that audience becomes an owned audience, and you can email directly. Email is still a really good, valuable resource because that connects you directly to your customer. And no matter what happens to any of the platforms and how they change their algorithm, you still own the customer based on the email list that you can create over time by creating thought leadership and content. And so the business outcome is just as important here. Calling, inquiries, bookings, or purchases, these are all things that help create a direct relationship with your customer. So as you think about building on the rented platform, you have direct ways that you can own your customer through emails and audiences, for example. You can save their contact information and you develop a relationship by warming your audience from that. And then from there, as they take action against your different offers, they call you or they inquire or book your service, then that becomes an asset of your business. And that allows you to create repeat business over time because that customer took action. And then that information on why they drove or actually decided to book your service becomes intel that you can then use to figure out how that flows back into the type of content you post on the social media platforms. And then that intel can learn back and go back into a learning loop as well. And then I would say that, the way that a lot of business owners now are getting a little bit smarter about this space is that they're measuring movement across the system as a whole. So they're looking at how they're appearing on search. They're looking at how they're appearing on Google Maps, for example. What kind of reach are their videos getting, for example? People are leaving them reviews, they're saving their content, they're mentioning them, how long they're watching their videos. That all creates discovery and trust with your audience. And then ultimately the demand itself that's driven from the content is going to directly to your website, or they're subscribing to your newsletter, for example, or they're repeat visitors on your webpage, for example. And then ultimately from there, they're actually making some sort of action to either call or book your service. So, being able to measure the full flow all the way from a cold audience to a really, really warm lead into an actual customer, that movement itself and all the different pieces of analytics there are really what business owners or AI forward 2026 forward looking business owners are doing to understand what's working. And the analytics behind that is becoming their moat, and they understand where exactly to spend their budget dollars. And that itself allows them to do more what works versus pointing their finger in the air and hoping that something, that they post content and people actually see it. No, they know exactly what's driving behavior. They know what's leading to revenue in their business. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling loop around everything that they do. And then you can take that a step further. And as you start to understand how buyers behave around your product or service from a week to 1 month, understanding the analytics and the trends around that, as no matter how the algorithms change, as the platform rules change, that helps just reinforce that same loop directly within what's working and driving revenue for your business. In terms of creating content, I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about trying to be everywhere all at the same time. And here's a really simple hack that you can really follow here. I would just write down one buyer question. What is the first most common inquiry that your customers ask of you? Because chances are the most common one is something that a lot of other people are probably asking as well. And you can capture that directly from your DMs, your emails, for example. But having a baseline on exactly what people are asking will allow you to start to think about how your content should be informed. You can create a couple of different pieces of Instagram carousels, or you can record a video on your phone, publish it as a story or a reel on your profile. And then you can repurpose that content itself. So as you record a long form video like this one, for example, You can take it, slice and dice it, put it directly within, create an Instagram reel out of a long form video, or take the transcript and put it into a newsletter, for example. And all these pieces of content allow you to repurpose a long form video into multiple pieces across multiple platforms. And Gary Vaynerchuk came up with this idea called the pyramid strategy, where one long form video can be sliced and diced into different pieces of content for a newsletter or an Instagram reel or a Twitter thread, for example. So I would just start with just one question. Ask yourself, what's the most number one question that a customer asks of your business? And then the one that you're probably repeating yourself over and over again in your head, I'm sure you can see it. That itself is a piece of content. And then recording a reel or a video around that really can help take the first step in your business to being reachable in this new era. And then obviously you start to review, you see what works, you see what signals people have. Are they engaging with your content? Are they liking your information? Are they hearting your videos? Are they leaving comments? That helps drive and create a self-fulfilling loop here, because you know what kind of content is resonating with your audience. And so my name is Samir. I run a business called Sam Method, and Sam is short for my name, Samir, but Sam stands for Systems, AI, and Marketing. And so what I'm trying to do is help business owners find ways to develop a system, use AI in the middle to grow their business using marketing. So SAM Method is my proprietary formula, which I try to put all these different legs together, and I'm offering a free audit right now. I just started this about a couple months ago. I've got a couple of customers that I'm helping with. I'm starting to see some patterns here. So I would love to help you out. If that's useful for you, you can look in the description below for a direct link. I'm doing a free audit of your business. Happy to help you out. And I'll give you an assessment across where your business is from the perspective of an AI search engine. And that way you can start to understand what gaps you have in your business. And completely free, fully as a courtesy. And if you found value in this video, I want you to hit like and subscribe. New channel, would love to help you out. But until next time, we'll see you next one, and we'll stay tuned for more content. Have a good one, everybody.